He had buried Wren Aldis on a Wednesday in November, in the ground of the East Callaway Cemetery, which was the ground where the East Callaway people put their dead when the dead were ready to be put somewhere, and he had done it alone because the ground was frozen and the grave had needed a full day's work, and there had been no one else available to do it. The ground had been harder than he had expected, which was to say it had been as hard as November ground in the East. Callaway District usually was but harder than a man could fully account for until he was in it, and the work had required the specific combination of physical effort and patience that the frozen ground required, and the specific combination had taken from before dawn until late afternoon, and the working had been the kind of working that was its own form of grief, which was the kind of grief that had somewhere to go and something to do with itself. He had not cried. He was not a man who cried easily, and he had not cried in the cemetery on the Wednesday, but the working had been the working of a man who was doing something for someone he had valued, and was doing it as well as it could be done because that was the only form of tribute available to him, and the doing it as well as it could be done was the tribute. Afterward, he had said a few words over the grave because Wren Aldis had been his neighbor for 11 years, and his friend for most of those years, and the words had seemed like the right thing. He had not prepared the words. He had stood at the head of the grave and had said what was true, which was that Wren Aldis had been a good man in the specific ways that mattered. Honest, reliable, the kind of man who did what he said he was going to do and expected the same from others. And the expectation was not a burden because it was accompanied by the willingness to be held to the same standard, and that he would be missed in the ways that a good man was missed when he was gone, which was specifically and not generally, and the specific ways were going to be apparent to the people who had known him as the days and months went on. Then he had gone to the house and told the wife it was done. Wren Aldis had died on a Monday in November, in his own bed, from the specific accumulation of a lung condition that had been developing for 2 years and had reached the point at which it was no longer developing, but concluding. And the concluding had taken 3 days and had been attended by his wife and by the doctor from Callaway, who had come on the second day and had confirmed what the wife had already known, which was that the concluding was the concluding and not a recoverable condition. Ward had known about the lung condition from its beginning, because Wren had told him in the second year of it in the specific way that Wren told things he did not want to dramatize but needed to say, which was plainly and once. He had said, "I have a condition in the lungs that is probably going to conclude me in some years. I am telling you because you would want to know, and because I am not going to talk about it much beyond this." Ward had said he understood and had asked one question, which was whether there was anything he needed, and Wren had said there was not at the moment, and that he would say something when there was. The saying had not come, because the concluding had been faster than either of them had expected in the later stages, and when the Monday had arrived, it had arrived as an ending rather than as a continuation of the condition that they had both been managing in the background of the 2 years. Ward had gone to the house on the Tuesday morning, the day after Wren had died, because that was when the practical things needed doing, and the practical things were the things he could do. He had spoken with Fay Aldis on the Tuesday, and she had been the way a person was the day after a loss, which was present and managing, and not yet fully inside the thing. He had asked what was needed. She had said the grave needed to be dug. He had said he would do it. She had said thank you. He had gone to the cemetery on the Wednesday, and had dug the grave and had come back to the house and had said it was done. His name was Ward Aldrin, and he was 38, and he had been running the East Callaway spread for 10 years, and had known Wren Aldis for 11, which was the year before the spread, when Ward had been working the range as a hired hand, and Wren had been his neighbor in the bunkhouse, and they had been the kind of friends that men became when they shared a bunkhouse and a work schedule and the specific conditions of that life, which was friends in the way of people who had seen each other at their worst and at their plainest, and had continued to think well of each other, and that kind of friendship had a durability that the easier kind did not. What Ward had seen of Wren in the bunkhouse year was a man who was honest without being blunt, which was a combination that was less common than either quality alone, and a man who was consistently willing to do the harder thing when the harder thing was the correct thing, and a man who could sit with a problem rather than needing to solve it immediately, which was a quality Ward valued because he had it himself and had noticed that not everyone did. What Wren had seen of Ward was presumably something similar, because the friendship had persisted through the bunkhouse year and through the decade since, which was the test that friendships either passed or did not. When Wren had moved to his own spread and Ward had moved to his own spread, they had been neighbors in the East Callaway district, and the friendship had continued in the way of friends who were neighbors, which was less frequent contact than the bunkhouse years, but contact of a more deliberate kind, which was the kind of contact that people maintained when they valued it and were not simply sharing proximity. They ate together once or twice a month. They helped each other with the specific kinds of work that benefited from two people rather than one. When Wren's lung condition had become apparent in the second year of it, Ward had been the first person outside the household to know, because Wren had told him in the specific way that people told things to the people they trusted, which was plainly and without drama, and Ward had received the telling in the specific way that people received things from people they trusted, which was by not making it into something other than what it was. The burying had been the last thing Ward could do for Wren, and he had done it. He had not told Wren's wife that he was going to do it. He had gone to the cemetery in the early morning and had worked through the day, and the grave had been ready by late afternoon, and he had gone to the house and told her it was done, and she had looked at him for a long moment and had said, "Thank you," and he had nodded and had gone back to his own spread, because that was what the situation required, and because asking for anything in return for the burying would have been the wrong kind of asking. Her name was Fay Aldis, and she was 32, and she had been married to Wren for 9 years, and had been a widow for 12 days when Ward Aldrin came to the door of the Aldis house on the first Sunday after the burial. The 9 years with Wren had been the 9 years they had been. Not extraordinary in their happiness, not difficult in their challenges, but good in the specific way that a marriage was good when both people were honest with each other and had made the kind of practical partnership that working a spread together required, and the partnership had worked because they had both understood their respective roles and had not resented the roles or wished they were different, and had treated each other with the specific respect of people who had agreed to share a life and were taking the agreement seriously. She had not been in love with Wren in the way that the word was used in stories, which was the overwhelming and singular way. She had been in love with him in the way that the word was used in lives, which was the chosen and maintained and continually renewed way, and that kind of love was more durable than the other kind, and was what she had lost when Wren died, and the losing of it was its own kind of grief, which was not the grief of a lightning strike but the grief of a long, steady light going out. She had not expected him. The community had been coming in the days after the burial, neighbors and people from the Callaway church and Wren's family from the north who had made the trip, and the coming had been the kind of coming that the community did when one of its people died, which was practical and well-intentioned and exhausting in the specific way of things that were simultaneously necessary and too much. She had managed the coming and had thanked the people who came and had tried to eat the food they brought and had slept badly, and had been through the first 10 days of widowhood in the way that the first 10 days of widowhood were, which was one at a time and without the ability to see very far ahead. When Ward Aldrin knocked at the door on the first Sunday, she opened it and found him standing there with a covered dish and the specific quality of a man who had shown up at a door, unsure whether the showing up was the right thing, and had decided to show up anyway. He said, "I brought food." He said he was not sure if it was needed, but he had made more than he needed himself, and it seemed like the right thing to do. She said it was needed. She said to come in. He came in. He put the food on the kitchen table. He did not sit down. He stood in the kitchen in the way of a man who had come to deliver something, and was not certain the delivery included staying, and she looked at him and she said, "Sit down." He sat down. They had tea. They talked about Wren in the way that two people talked about a person they had both known and both lost, differently from different positions of loss, and the conversation was the specific kind of conversation that this kind of loss produced, which was honest and non-performative and sometimes stopped mid-sentence because the sentence had run into the loss and could not go further. She had this conversation with several people in the weeks after Wren's death, and most of those conversations had a specific quality of management, the other person managing their own discomfort with the loss through the form of the conversation. And the conversation with Ward did not have this quality. He was not uncomfortable. He was sad, and the sadness was real and present and was not being managed or performed, and the absence of the management was the thing that made the first Sunday different from the other first conversations. He stayed for approximately an hour. He said he should get back. He stood up and he picked up the empty dish from the table, and she said to leave the dish, and he said he would leave the dish. He said he hoped the food had helped. She said it had. He nodded. He went to the door. He said, "If there's anything that needs doing, I'll come by on Sundays and do it." She said, "You don't need to do that." He said, "I know." He said, "I'll come by on Sundays." He left. That was the first Sunday. The second Sunday, he came and fixed the fence post at the north corner of the kitchen garden that had been leaning since October and that Wren had planned to fix before the winter and had not. She had not mentioned it. He had seen it on the way to the door and had come back from his truck with a post driver and had fixed it before he knocked. She had looked at the post when she came outside to tell him she had made tea, and she had not said anything about it, and he had not said anything about it, and they had had tea at the kitchen table and talked about the winter conditions on both spreads and what the feed situation was going to look like for both herds, and he had stayed for an hour and a half, which was half an hour longer than the first Sunday, and she had not noticed the half hour until after he had left. The third Sunday he came and the weather had turned, and what he did was chop enough wood to last her 2 weeks, which was 2 weeks of wood she had not known how to ask for and had not asked for, and when he came in from the chopping she had made soup and they had eaten the soup at the kitchen table, and he had stayed for 2 hours, and the 2 hours had been a different quality of time from the previous Sundays, which was the quality of time that was not being filled or managed, but was simply being used by 2 people who were comfortable in the same space. The fourth Sunday she had a question to ask him. The question was about the winter feed arrangement for the 3 cattle she had inherited with the spread because the arrangement had been Wren's to manage, and she did not know the details of it, and the winter was coming, and the details were going to matter. She had been preparing to ask the Callaway feed merchant, but the Sunday visit had arrived first, and she asked Ward instead, because Ward would know, and Ward knew, and they spent 20 minutes talking through the feed arrangement, and he made notes for her on the paper she gave him, and the notes were clear and organized, and she put them in the folder where she kept the operational documents. The rest of the visit was the rest of the visit, which was 2 hours, and the 2 hours were comfortable in the way the third Sunday had been comfortable. The fifth Sunday she was not home when he arrived. She had gone to Callaway for the feed merchant meeting she had arranged before Ward had given her the notes, and the meeting had run long. And when she came home, he was sitting on the porch steps with his hat in his hands, and he stood up when she came up the road, and she said she was sorry, and he said there was nothing to be sorry about, and she said, "Come in anyway." And he came in, and they had tea, and he stayed 3 hours, which was the longest Sunday yet. And she thought about the 3 hours that evening in the way she was beginning to think about the Sundays, which was with the specific attention of a person who was keeping track of something without having decided to keep track of it. She noticed this. She did not say anything about it. She thought about it that evening after he had gone. This is Dusty Vows, where the Sundays accumulated and she knew what they meant before he did. If you want the next story the moment it lands, subscribe now. Then back to the Sundays. The sixth Sunday he came and she had made a meal. Not tea and whatever was available, but an actual prepared meal. The kind of meal that took time and intention, roasted chicken and bread she had made the day before, and a potato preparation she had learned from her mother and had not made since before Wren had died. When he sat down at the table and saw the meal, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Thank you," and she said she had wanted to make something, and he nodded, and they ate. And the eating was the eating of 2 people who were comfortable sharing a table, which was a different quality from the eating of 2 people who were being polite to each other, and the difference was specific, and both of them knew it. During the 6th Sunday meal, she told him about Wren's last 2 months, the things that had been said and not said, the specific quality of being with someone who is concluding a life, the way the days had been in the house during those months. She had not told this to anyone else in its full form. She had given parts of it to people who had asked, portions that were appropriately sized for the asking. And she gave Ward the full form because the full form was what was available to her, and he was the person she was sitting across the table from, and the meal had created a quality of occasion that she had not had since before Wren's illness had become the primary condition of the household. He listened without managing the listening. He asked one question, which was about a specific thing she had mentioned, and the question was the question of a person who had been paying attention and wanted to understand more precisely, not the question of a person who was performing engagement. The 7th Sunday, it was December, and the weather was harder, and she had been in the house for most of the week, and when he came she was glad in a way that she had been glad to see very few people in the 6 weeks since Wren had died, which was the specific gladness of a person who is not glad at the category of the visitor, but at the visitor themselves. She had been glad to see the people from the church, and she had been glad to see Wren's family, and the gladness had been the gladness of being cared for, which was real and appropriate. The gladness she felt when Ward came was a different gladness, which was the gladness of being with a specific person, rather than the gladness of being cared for by the community, and the difference was the difference she had noticed and was not yet ready to examine. The 8th Sunday, she asked him a question that was not about the spread. She asked about his own spread, how it was going, what the winter was like for operations, whether the East Range flooding had affected his water supply the way it had affected the Aldous Spread's east well. He answered. He asked her questions in return. The conversation was the conversation of two people who were talking to each other rather than one person managing the grief of another, and both of them noticed this and neither of them said anything about it. And the conversation went on for 4 hours, and neither of them was aware of the 4 hours until the dark outside the window made the time visible. When she walked him to the door on the 8th Sunday, he stopped on the porch and turned and said, "I want to say something." She waited. He said, "I know this started because of Wren. I want you to know that I know that." She said, "Yes." He said, "I'm not sure what it is now. I don't know how to say that correctly." She said, "You said it correctly." He nodded. He went to his truck. She went back inside and stood in the kitchen for a moment before sitting down. And the standing was the standing of a person who had received information and was processing it. And the information was that he was aware of the change in the Sundays and did not know how to name what they had changed into. And the not knowing was not absence. It was uncertainty, and uncertainty was proximity to knowing rather than distance from it. The 9th Sunday, she told him something about herself that was not about Wren and not about the grief. A thing she had done before the marriage, a year she had spent in the South working on her cousin's farm and the things she had learned there. He listened. He asked a question about the cousin's farm. She answered. He asked another question. She answered. He told her something about himself that was not about Wren. The year he had worked up north before the East Callaway spread had become available. The cold of it, the specific quality of work in that kind of cold. A mistake he had made in the first year that had cost him money and had taught him something that he had not been able to learn any other way. She listened. They were telling each other things. Not things related to the grief or the burial or the situation. Things about themselves, the things that a person told another person when they were becoming known to each other, and the becoming known was the thing that she had been aware of for several Sundays and was now aware of more fully. The 10th Sunday she understood something, which was that she had been coming back every Sunday because the alternative was not coming back, and not coming back was not something she was willing to do, and the unwillingness was information. She had been aware of the information for several Sundays and had not done anything with it because doing something with it required addressing it, and addressing it required knowing what to say, and she did not yet know what to say. She knew what she felt. She did not know what he felt. The two things were not the same, and she was not the kind of person who said the first thing without having enough information about the second to know whether the saying was going to be received correctly. She was gathering the information. The 8th Sunday had given her some He did not know how to say what it was now, and the not knowing was the information, and the information was that he was also aware that the thing had changed and was not sure of the name for what it had changed into, and the not sure was not absence, it was uncertainty, and uncertainty and absence were different things. The 10th Sunday she went home and she thought about the information she had gathered and she decided she was not ready yet to say the thing, and the not ready was correct, and she waited. The 11th Sunday he did not come. She did not know why. She spent the Sunday doing the things she did on Sundays when he came, making tea, being in the kitchen, being available, and he did not come, and the not coming had a quality she had not experienced before in the 11 weeks of the Sundays, which was the quality of an absence that was felt as an absence rather than simply observed as one. She had known he was not there in the way that the kitchen knew the fire was not lit, not as a neutral fact but as a condition. By late afternoon she understood that he was not coming, and she went to her room, and she was quieter than she had been in several Sundays, and the quiet had a specific texture that was the texture of information received, which was that the 11th Sunday's absence was telling her something about the 10th Sunday's decision to wait, and the something was that the waiting was over. On the Monday morning she went to the East Callaway spread. He answered the door with the look of a man who had been doing something he needed to stop doing to answer the door, and when he saw it was her the look changed in a way she noticed but could not fully read. There was surprise in it, and something beneath the surprise that was not surprise. She said, "You didn't come on Sunday." He said, "I know." He said he was sorry. He said he had thought maybe it was time to give her more space, that the Sundays had been going on for 11 weeks, and maybe they had run their course and she needed the space now more than she had needed it in the early weeks. She said, "Why did you think that?" He said he had been thinking about it for a few weeks and the 10th Sunday had seemed like a natural conclusion of a kind, and he had not wanted to be in the way. She said, "In the way of what?" He was quiet. She said, "Ward." He said, "I don't know how to say this correctly." She said, "You said that once before. You said it on the porch on the 8th Sunday." He said, "I remember." She said, "You said you didn't know what it was now." He said, "I still don't. I know what it started as. I don't know what it is now, and I don't know what it should be, and I didn't come on Sunday because I was trying to figure out what it should be, and I couldn't figure it out, and I didn't know what else to do." She said, "What you should do is come on Sunday." He said, "Faye." She said, "What?" He said, "You were married to Wren for 9 years." She said, "Yes." He said, "I was his friend." She said, "Yes." He was quiet. She said, "Those things are true. They are both true. And I am standing at your door on a Monday morning because you didn't come on Sunday, and both things being true is still true while I am standing here." He said he did not know how to navigate the two things being true simultaneously. She said, "I know." She said, "I don't fully know how to navigate it either. But I know that not coming on Sunday is not the navigation, and I came here to tell you that." He was quiet for a long moment in the specific way he was quiet when he was processing something he had not expected, and what he had not expected was her at his door on a Monday morning, and the not expecting had produced the looking change she had seen when she answered the door, and the looking change was still present. He said, "I buried him because he was my friend, and it was the right thing to do." She said, "I know that." He said, "I came on the first Sunday because it seemed like the right thing to do." She said, "I know that too." He said, "The other Sundays. I don't know why I kept coming. I mean, I know why, but I don't know how to say it." She said, "Say it." He said, "Because I wanted to." She said, "Yes." He said, "That's not nothing." She said, "No, it is not nothing." He said, "Faye," her name, the first time with the full weight of it, said the way a name sounded when it was the name of the woman who had said to come in on the first Sunday and had made the meal on the 6th and had come to his door on the Monday morning and was standing in the cold with the specific quality of a person who had said the thing and was going to let it be what it was. She waited. "Tell me, when she went to his door on the Monday morning, did you hear what that took?" 11 Sundays of her coming to him. The 12th week, she drove to his door. That is the whole of the declaration. Leave your answer in the comments. I read every one. Now, back to the door. I'm not going anywhere. She said it the way she said things she had arrived at after a long time of arriving, which was plainly and as a fact and without the management of how the plainness was going to land. She held his gaze at the door of his own spread. You buried him, and you asked nothing, and I came back every Sunday because I needed to come back, and I am standing at your door on a Monday morning because you didn't come on Sunday, and that is what I have to say, and I am not going anywhere. As if it were the simplest arithmetic in the world. Fay Aldous. Her name for him, in his mouth, said the way a name sounded when it was the name of the woman who had said to come in on the first Sunday, and had made the meal on the 6th Sunday, and had come to his door on the Monday morning, and was standing in the cold with the specific quality of a person who had said the thing and was going to let it be what it was. He stepped back from the door. He said, "Come in." She came in. The kitchen of the East Callaway spread looked the way a kitchen looked when one person had been managing it alone for 10 years, which was clean and functional and without the warmth that a kitchen had when more than one person used it regularly. She had noticed this quality on the Sundays when she had glimpsed it through the door. The Sundays had all been at the Aldous house, not the Aldrin spread, and the kitchen confirmed what she had glimpsed. He put water on for tea. He stood at the stove with his back to her for a moment, and she could see from the set of his shoulders that he was managing something, and she did not press. He turned and brought the cups and sat down across from her, and he said, "I owe you an apology." She said, "You don't." He said, "I decided what the Sundays were without asking you what the Sundays were, and then I made a decision based on what I had decided without telling you I was deciding. That was wrong." She said, "You were trying not to make things more complicated." He said, "Yes, and in trying not to make things more complicated, I made them more complicated, which is the specific irony of that approach." She said, "It is a fairly common irony." He was quiet for a moment. He said, "I want to say the thing I didn't know how to say." She said she was listening. He said, "I came on the first Sunday because it was the right thing to do. I came on the second Sunday because I had said I would. I came on the Sundays after that because I wanted to, and that was the thing I did not know how to account for, and the not accounting for was the thing that made me stop rather than some conclusion about the Sundays being done. They were not done. I stopped because I did not understand them well enough to continue, and I should have said that rather than simply not coming, and I am sorry for the not coming." She said, "The waiting is done." He said, "Yes." She said, "The Sundays can be what they are now." He said, "Yes." He said, "What are they?" She said, "I don't know exactly, but they are not what they were in the beginning, and whatever they are now is what we have, and I would rather have what we have than not have it." He was quiet. He said, "Ward," his own name, said the way a man said his own name when he was settling something with himself in the presence of another person. She said, "Fay." Her name, the second time his voice carried it, said the way a name sounded when it was the name of the person who had come to the door on the Monday morning, and was sitting at his kitchen table in December, and was not going anywhere. He nodded once. The matter was settled. The kitchen table was between them, and the winter was outside, and Fay Aldous was at the East Callaway spread, and neither of them was going anywhere. She had come back every Sunday until he understood, and the understanding had arrived on the Sunday he had not come, and the not coming had produced the Monday morning, and the Monday morning had produced the door, and the conversation at the door, and the coming in, and the kitchen, and the tea, and the saying of the thing, and the thing was here, and both of them were staying. He had buried her husband and asked nothing, and the asking nothing had been the right thing and the beginning of the right thing rather than the end of anything, and both of them understood now that it had been the beginning, and the understanding was what she had been coming back every Sunday to produce, and the production was complete, and neither of them was going anywhere. "Tell me, when she went to his door on the Monday morning, did you hear what that took?" 11 Sundays of her coming to him. The 12th week, she drove to his door. That is the whole of the declaration. Leave your answer in the comments. I read everyone. Now, back to the spread. The Sundays were going to continue. Not in the same form. The form was going to become what the form became as the thing became what it became. But the Sundays were not behind them. They were the basis of what was ahead of them. And what was ahead of them was the East Callaway spread and the Aldous spread on the other side of the ridge, and the winter that was ongoing, and the spring that was going to come, and both of them going to be there for the spring and for every season after it. She was not only Wren Aldis's widow. She had never been only that, and Ward had placed her there, and the Sundays had moved her out of the placement, and the moving had required her to keep coming and required her patience and her willingness to let the Sundays be what they were, rather than forcing them to be something else, and the willingness had produced the kitchen and the tea and the agreement and the thing named. What had happened across 11 Sundays was this. The first Sunday she had been managing grief and accepting a neighbor's help. The second Sunday she had been the same, but had noticed the fence post. The third Sunday she had been glad in the way of a person being cared for. The fourth Sunday she had asked him a question she could have asked someone else. The fifth Sunday she had been sorry he had waited on the porch and had not examined why she was sorry. The sixth Sunday she had made a meal, and the making of the meal had been a choice, and the choice told her something she had noted but not yet named. The seventh Sunday the gladness had been specific, not general. The eighth Sunday she had heard him say he did not know what it was now and had understood that the not knowing was proximity to knowing rather than distance from it. The ninth Sunday she had told him things about herself that were not about Wren, and he had listened in the way of a person who was genuinely interested in what she was, not only in what she had lost. The 10th Sunday she had understood all of it and had decided to wait. The 11th Sunday he had not come, and the absence had ended the waiting. That was the arc of 11 Sundays, and the arc had produced a Monday morning, and the Monday morning had produced this. Both of them at the kitchen table of the East Callaway spread in December with the winter outside, and neither of them going anywhere. He had buried Wren Aldis in the East Callaway Cemetery on a Wednesday in November, and had asked nothing, and the asking nothing had been the thing that made everything else possible, because a man who asked something for the burying would have attached a string to the act, and the string would have changed what the act was, and the act needed to be what it was. Pure and complete and without condition, for what came after it to be what it was. What came after it was 11 Sundays and a Monday morning, and a door opened, and a coming in, and tea at a kitchen table, and the thing finally said, and the saying was here, and both of them were in it. She had come back every Sunday. The first Sunday had been for Wren. The second Sunday had been for Wren, and something else, something she had not named yet. By the fourth Sunday it had been for something she was aware of but had not examined. By the seventh Sunday she had examined it and had found what it was. By the 10th Sunday she had known what to do with what she had found, and had decided to wait. The 11th Sunday had ended the waiting, not because she had decided it was done, but because the absence had told her it was. The telling was the whole of what the 11th Sunday had said, and the hearing of it was what had sent her to his door, and the door had been the right door, and the Monday had been the right morning, and the saying had been the right saying, and now she was at the kitchen table of the East Callaway spread, and neither of them was going anywhere. Both spreads were on the East Callaway range, and both of them were going to be running those spreads, and the running of two spreads on the same range had a specific practical logic that two people who each ran their own spread understood without needing it explained. And the practical logic was one of the things that would become clear as the thing became what it was going to become, and the becoming was ahead of them, and neither of them was going anywhere. The Wednesday in November that Ward had stood in the East Callaway Cemetery and worked the frozen ground all day had been the day that started all of it. He had not known he was starting something. He had known he was finishing something, which was his obligation to his friend, and the finishing had been what he went there to do. The starting had been a different thing that had happened in the same day without his awareness of it, and the awareness had come in the form of 11 Sundays and a Monday morning, and the awareness was complete now, and both of them were staying. The spring was ahead of them. The East Callaway Range in spring was a specific kind of spring, which was the spring that came to high ground after a hard winter and had a specific quality of arrival. Not gradual, but present. Present one morning when it had not been the morning before. And both of them were going to be on that range for that arrival, and for the arrival of the spring after it and all the springs after that. Wren Aldis was in the ground of the East Callaway Cemetery where Ward had put him, and the ground was the right ground, and the grave was the right grave, and the words had been the right words, and both of them carried Wren forward in the way that the living carried the dead. Not by holding them back, but by going forward themselves and taking what the dead had given them. What Wren had given them, without knowing he was giving it, was the occasion for 11 Sundays and a Monday morning, and the thing finally said at a door in winter. The occasion was not what Wren had intended to give. He had intended to give them his friendship and his neighborliness and his honest character, and he had given those things, and those things had produced the specific kind of friendship between Ward and Fay that only existed because of the kind of man Wren had been, and the friendship had become this, and this was here, and both of them were in it. She had come back every Sunday until he understood, and now he understood, and she was not going anywhere, and he was not going anywhere, and the East Callaway spread was where both of them were, and the Aldis spread was on the other side of the ridge, and both spreads were on the East Callaway Range, and both of them were going to be on that range for the spring and for every season after it, and neither of them was going anywhere, and the matter was settled, and both of them were staying, and it held. She had come back every Sunday because the Sundays were what the Sundays were, which was the only available form for the thing while the thing was still becoming what it was going to become, and the form had done its work, and the work was complete, and what was ahead of them was not another Sunday, but all the days between the Sundays and all the Sundays themselves and all the seasons on the East Callaway Range, and neither of them was going anywhere. He had dug the grave alone in November in the frozen ground of the East Callaway Cemetery, and had said the right words, and had gone to the house and said it was done, and had asked for nothing. And the asking for nothing had been the whole of the gift, because a gift that asked for something was not a gift, but an exchange, and an exchange would have been a different thing from what the burying was, and the burying had needed to be what it was for what came after it to be what it was, which was 11 Sundays accumulating one at a time from November into December, and a Monday morning in December when she drove to his door, and the door was the right door, and the morning was the right morning, and neither of them was going anywhere, and the matter was settled, and both of them were staying, and the East Callaway Range was where both of them were going to be, and the spring was coming, and the spring after that, and all the seasons ahead of them were ahead of them, and neither of them was going anywhere at all. The East Callaway Range had its two spreads and its East Callaway Cemetery, and its specific quality of winter that gave way to its specific quality of spring, and both of them were on that range, and neither of them was going anywhere, and Wren Aldis was in the ground of the East Callaway Cemetery where Ward had put him, and the ground was the right ground, and the winter was in the process of becoming the spring that would be the first spring of all of this, and both of them were going to be there for the first spring and for the springs after it, and neither of them was going anywhere, and Ward Aldrin had buried Wren Aldis on a Wednesday in November, and had asked nothing, and Fay Aldis had come back every Sunday until he understood, and he understood, and she was at his kitchen table, and neither of them was going anywhere, and the matter was settled, and both of them were staying. She had come back every Sunday, and the Sundays had done their work slowly and correctly and without being forced, and the work was done now, and what the work had produced was this. Both of them at a kitchen table in December with the winter outside, and the thing said and the thing received, and the neither of them going anywhere. The slowness of the Sundays had been the right speed. A faster pace would have arrived at a different place, or would have arrived at the same place but from the wrong direction, and the direction mattered because the direction was the whole of how you arrived at something, and both of them had arrived at this from the right direction, which was the direction of 11 Sundays and a Monday morning, and a door, and a conversation, and a coming in, and neither of them going anywhere. The matter was settled completely, and both of them were staying, and the East Callaway Range in winter was going to become the East Callaway Range in spring, and both of them were going to be there for the spring, and neither of them was going anywhere, and it held. The Sundays from here were going to be different from the Sundays that had come before, and the different was better than the same, and the better was here, and both of them were in the better, and neither of them was going anywhere. She had come back 11 Sundays, and he had not come on the 12th, and she had come to his door on the Monday of the 12th week, and the door had been the right door, and the Monday had been the right morning, and the thing had been said, and the thing had been received, and the matter was settled, and both of them were staying, and it held. And the Sundays had been the right shape for the thing they were, and the thing was here, and both of them were staying. She had come back every Sunday, and he had been there every Sunday, and the 11th Sunday he had not been there, and the not being there had told her what she needed to know, and she had acted on it, and the acting had produced this, and this was enough, and more than enough, and neither of them was going anywhere. Not ever, not once.